Hello and welcome back to the Federalist Papers in 10 minutes or a little bit more. So far, I have not been able to keep one of these to 10 minutes, but I'm going to try my best this time. So, the Federalist Papers, they were published in a New York publication trying to get people to vote for the Constitution. They wanted the Constitution to be ratified. This one is written by Alexander Hamilton to the people of the state of New York. We proceed now to an examination of the Judiciary department of the proposed government. So we are going to be talking all about the judicial system. And what did the Articles of Confederation not have? Oh, right, they didn't have a judicial system. All right, he's saying here that this is not disputed. Nobody is arguing that we don't need a federal judiciary, but they've got some problems with the way that we're doing it. So this is why the way that we're doing it is awesome, and this is why we need the Constitution so that it sets up this exact federal judiciary, and it's awesome. That is what Hamilton is arguing in his writing of Federalist number 78. So people don't like the mode of appointing judges. People don't like the tenure to which by they hold their places. They don't like the judges serve life terms. And they don't like the authority and the relations between the judiciary and the other branches of government. All right. So here he says the note of appointing judges. He explained that in the last two Federalist Papers, but we do not have to memorize Fed 76 and 77, so we get to skip the method of appointing judges. Yay! Okay, so now the tenure that they are to hold. First of all, we have already put up that they are to hold their offices only during good behavior. They can only hold office as long as they are not convicted of a crime and as long as they are not convicted of treason. That is important. So, yay, go the Constitution. Let's make sure that our judges actually want to be in America and are not breaking the law themselves. All right? All the way down at the bottom, it will always be least dangerous to the rights of the Constitution because it will be least in capacity to annoy or injure them. What is he saying here? Is that the the judicial branch is the weakest branch of government by default. All right? The executive holds the sword. The executive holds the sword. The legislature commands the purse. Okay? The judiciary doesn't have the sword, doesn't have the purse. It is by default the weakest, the least danger to a democracy, the least danger to our Constitution. All right? Judges can't take any direct action. They have neither force nor will. They can't take direct action. They can't make laws. They can only interpret the laws that they have in front of them. All right? They depend on the president. They depend on the executive for the efficacy of its judgments. The executive has to carry out the interpretations of the law which the judicial rules on. So if the judicial branch strikes down a law due to judicial review, it's up to the president to make sure that that law is, in fact, not enacted anymore. So not only do they not have power of the purse, do they not have power of the sword, they also don't really have the power to do anything except interpret the laws. They rely on the president to have any power at all. So because they are the weakest of the three departments, they need to be able to defend itself against attacks from the other two branches. All right, they have to be given adequate protection. So to secure liberty in the federal courts, it has to be separate from the other two. And it has to be completely separate from the other two. So how? That's the big question, is how do we keep the federal court system completely separate from the other two branches of government? Let's skip down to page 4. All right, he says, nothing can contribute so much to its firmness and independency as permanency in office. The best way to ensure that it's independent from the other two branches is life terms. That's why that's done. People can't vote the judges in, and once judges are in, they can't be voted out. They're never up for re-election. All right? So that is how they stay completely independent. He goes a little bit more into detail about that later. So, there we go. First of all, it needs to be a check on the legislative branch so that the legislative doesn't have too much power. All right, legislative can't pass bills of attainder or ex post facto laws, which you have learned about in our discussions of the Constitution. And those limitations can only be preserved in practice through the courts. Some argue that the legislative is subject to the judiciary because of judicial review. Okay, so yeah, it can declare the acts of the judiciary void. All right, it has the power to decide if a law is unconstitutional and therefore render it void. So yes, it does have some power over the judicial branch. That's another way to keep it from being attacked. All right, so this power is necessary to ensure that the Constitution remains in effect. That's why this power is so essential. It makes sure that Congress is not all powerful. That's in this here paragraph. Legislators cannot be beholden to judge their own actions. All right, they're not the ones that interpret the laws. They're the ones that make the laws. They are not the judges of their own constitutionality. So the courts were designed to be an intermediate body between the people and the legislature. All right, they keep the latter within the limits assigned to their authority. He goes on to further explain judicial review, that if there should happen to be an irreconcilable variance between two laws, okay, if one law and another law at the federal level are in contrast with one another, they have to go with the one that aligns better with the Constitution. The Constitution is the highest law of the land, thanks to the Supremacy Clause, and it always comes before new legislation. In the past, it's always been the custom of a federal court to uphold the newest legislation before the older legislation. New was always better when it came to the court system. Not anymore. Now the Constitution is the thing that is there to ensure that we have our natural rights preserved. The Constitution is the thing that the courts are going to fight to preserve. All right? It makes sure that the law always stands in the best interests of the will of the people, and that they make sure that it aligns with that document, the document that is meant to preserve our liberty and our constitutional rights. All right? They ought to regulate their decisions by the fundamental laws rather than by those which are not fundamental. That is why the Constitution is supreme. That is why judges always uphold the Constitution. All right? So this is, you know, here's where they say that the judges used to go with the newer laws first. This is a complete reversal of that, and so people were a little bit upset about that. It's the duty of the judicial tribunals to adhere to the latter, and which is the Constitution, and disregard the new law that goes against the Constitution. All right, this consideration will afford a strong argument to the permanent tenure of judicial offices. Why is that? If a legislator passes a law, worked really hard to get a law passed, and it's come up under judicial review, that, hey, we think that this law is actually going against people's constitutional rights, then they have the power to strike that down. That legislator is going to get very upset. All right. The judicial branch can upset the legislative branch in this way. And so if a new group of legislators wanted to come in and say, hey, we got to make sure that we do not vote these guys back into office, that's why they're life tenured. All right. You put a judge in for life, and then no matter what laws they strike down, no matter what lawmakers they make upset, the lawmakers have no authority to remove them from office. All right. Judges are a life term as long as you obey the rules, as long as you don't commit treason. All right. So down here on page 9, essentially page 9 is saying that if anyone wanted to abolish the government and a majority got behind them, the judges would be there to interject a sense of impartiality because they're not beholden to the whims of even a majority in Congress. All right, they are beholden to the Constitution and the Constitution alone. So if we want to secure liberty for posterity through this Constitution, not just for right now, then this judicial branch is what is going to prevent someone from overhauling the Constitution 10 years down the road. Changing government should be a slow process, and it should not be a quick process, and a federal judiciary does ensure this. All right, so down to page 10. Not only does it ensure that legislation doesn't go against the Constitution, it protects the people from their constitutional rights being violated. It ensures laws that are passed that violate the rights of the few get struck down. All right? Make sure that those laws are not upheld. It keeps the legislative branch from violating anyone's constitutional rights. That's why we need this federal judiciary. If they're elected by the people, then that's obviously a problem, because then the people can vote them out, and we already went over why it's a problem if the legislature votes them in. So that's why we want them to have life terms. And then finally, he says on page 12 that the sufficient skill and laws to qualify them and making deductions. They need to, basically that the records of those precedents must unavoidably swell to a very considerable bulk. The knowledge base that a judge has to have is so vast that we want qualified people in the position of federal judges, of Supreme Court justices, of federal judiciary. All right? They need to know the laws. They need to know the precedents. They need to know the codes of conduct of their office. They need to have the sufficient integrity, which comes with age. We can't afford to disqualify individuals with this knowledge base and skill set by limiting the amount of time they have in office. And also, by only allowing them to serve temporary terms, we might discourage such characters from quitting a lucrative line of practice to accept a seat on the bench. So that would have a tendency to throw the administration of justice into hands of those less able. That's pretty self-explanatory. That is the reason why we need a judiciary that is separate, a judiciary that can review the legislative, and a judiciary that serves life terms. That is why this Constitution's awesome, and you should ratify it. That's Federalist 78 in 12 minutes and 55 seconds. I'm getting closer to 10 minutes with each one of these. So sorry for going over 10, but happy studying and good luck.